Cheryl, you challenged me to find some organisms with some interesting phenology, and I am so excited to bring you to today's park. I am in the middle of Quito. I don't know if you can hear the car alarm behind me, but there are some interesting places that you can find interesting plants and other interesting organisms here. We are a little bit in the rainy season. Finding insects is a little bit difficult, so I'll be showing you some plants. But before we go and venture into the park, sorry it took so long, by the way. I had to write the director of the museums and ask formal permission to film in the park, so I hope you appreciate the effort even though we're a couple weeks late. So before we dive into the jungles of Quito and find some hidden places with some cool plants, I wanted to rate your last challenge. I think it was so amazing and so cool how you found not only evidence of animals, but evidence of animals eating each other. Amazing, mind blown, I don't know, like 100 epic points, I guess. Awesome. So let's go to the ecological and archaeological park, Rumipamba. Rumipamba is one of my favorite places to bring people on tours just because it is so interesting. It has both an ecological aspect of the park. As you can see, the park is really close to Quito, just like not even 10 minutes to my house. You can see Quito down the corner, and it's this really beautiful paramo ecosystem that they've worked really hard on maintaining and making sure that invasive species like eucalyptus aren't within the park's borders. So it's really great to find insects and pretty interesting plants and specialized orchids and stuff like that. But also the archaeological side of the park is so interesting. You get to learn about the people that were here before the Incans and before the Spanish, the Quitu people. You can learn about their everyday lives, how they lived, how they worked, how they interacted, how we learned stuff about them, and you even get to learn a little bit about their funerary practices before going and seeing the actual dig site. So it's an absolutely beautiful museum and one of my favorites. I'm going to stop talking about the park and start talking about the phenology of the beautiful plants that you can find here. And for those of you in the back, phenology is basically seasonality, or the study of the timing of reoccurring biological events. I'm so excited to show you some of the plants that are found here and some of the ones that are actually in season. So I think that's one of the most interesting things actually about Ecuador is people don't realize that Ecuador actually does have seasons. You can't just come whenever and expect to see all the things, because that just, like, we have seasons here and we have phenologies. Also, I would like to thank Daniel for being our guide and teaching me all about the plants, because I know crap about paramo plants. So I'm so excited to show you around, show you some really cool plants that are here, and also give you your challenge.
Turf Wars, a battle of wits, knowledge, and creativity. Which naturalist will prove they're the best? Choose your fighter and watch the action unfold on Turf Wars!
Because it's the rainy season, lots of things are flowering and fruiting right now. For example, right now is the season of mora, or the blackberries. This is mora silvestre, or the wild blackberry. Lots of people are surprised that you can find blackberries in Ecuador, but this is a native species to here, and pretty good. You can eat it. This species of blackberry is the Andean blackberry, or mora de Castilla, as it's also called. And this is one that's actually cultivated because it's a big berry that tastes really good and is native to this area as well. Many countries in Central and South America, you can find this growing at high altitudes. Right now is its season. Because apparently I'm stuck on food at the current moment, we're going to talk about the banana passion fruit, or taxo as we call it here. This is a passion vine flower and is very similar to passion fruit, just a slightly different shape and a slightly different flavor. It's eaten by people today. You can get juice from it, ice cream from it, just the regular fruit. This one was eaten by a non-human, probably a bird. However, humans of all throughout the ages have been eating taxo, including people from the pre-Columbian eras. It's still cultivated, although it's a high altitude passion vine flower growing from about 1,800 meters above sea level to about 3,500 meters above sea level. And here you can kind of see like the process of the fruit growing from the flower to making fruit. This beautiful flower is the yin yin flower, and it produces seed pods eventually that when you pick them up and shake them, they make a little kind of like rattling noise. Another interesting flower is the Quito orchid, and it only flowers during the rainy season here, so in these months. It shoots up that little stalk, and it's really interesting orchid because it's not epiphytic, it actually just grows out of the ground. Okay, Sheryl, now it's time for your challenge. Sheryl, I know that you work in the grasslands in Illinois, and I know that you're not just passionate about the ecology and conservation, but also the indigenous land uses and how the indigenous people lived in that area. So your challenge is to find me examples, or at least show me how indigenous people either constructed some of their buildings or their structures or managed the land. And I will start here at Rumipamba. The people who lived here are the Quitu people, and they built structures like the one behind me, which is actually not a house, but a workshop where people would dye fabrics and make different textiles. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the construction of this building. This replica was constructed with the same techniques and the same materials as the originals would have been made. I'll talk about the rest inside, but the roof, this straw is paja totora, and it's a common grass that you can find growing in the highlands here. So now we're on the inside of the workshop, and you can really see some of the construction here. Normally, I wouldn't be sitting on this stump, but as they would be dyeing fabrics with a fire over there, the smoke would rise, and that would be where my face is, so I would be sitting on the floor. But we're not doing that right now, so let's look at the construction. The walls are made using a technique called berique, and berique is the mixture of mud or chocoto, and chocoto is a specific kind of mud that is volcanic ash, regular mud, and water mixed together, and then has that straw that's used in the roofing also mixed in between these wooden columns to make these really strong walls, and also keeps the inside here pretty cool. In the Paramo, it can get really hot outside when the sun is out, so it keeps the building a little bit cool. The wooden columns that you see would have been made out of a plant called quixar. Quixar is this plant here, and while it may not have been the strongest plant, most of the Paramo plants are actually pretty strong with their wood just because they're slow growing, but it was probably just really common before all the invasive eucalyptus showed up. This stuff was growing everywhere, so just convenient to make columns out of. Another important building material within the walls would have been a small plant called sigsge, which helps make the building earthquake proof, which is really important up here. Sigsge is an interesting plant. It's a little grass-like plant, but Daniel's going to show us a little bit about it. Basically, on the leaf, you have one side that's completely smooth and doesn't hurt you at all, and you have the other side, which is really tough and like a saw blade.
What?
It's really sharp. But in the other side is safe. Cut a lot.
That's amazing. Thank you.
This is another plant that may have been used to construct either the workshops or the houses, and this is carrizo, and it just depends on whatever happened to be available at the time, whichever was used in the construction. Now that I talked about the building, let's talk about some plant and land uses. This berry, which is actually just coming into season itself, full circle, is called igulan, and it was used as a traditional dye, making a very beautiful purpley dye. These berries aren't quite ripe yet. Let me show you a good one. So here's a nice purpley one you can see, and as soon as I squash it, you can see this really beautiful bluey purple dye that comes out of it. And this berry was very commonly used in this area to dye textiles and fabrics. And now my fingers are purple. All right, Sheryl, the last thing that I'm going to show you, and this is done in a voiceover because I definitely can't walk through this and talk, so enjoy voiceover. But this trail is a replica of the old Culuncos. You can find the Culuncos all over Ecuador, and a couple of the lodges that I know just randomly found them in the back of their lodge, in the back of their reserve, hidden in the jungle. These paths look like they were carved into the mountains, but they weren't. They were just the paths that people who were using them to trade from the coast to the Sierra or the high Paramo region would just use and walk on so much that it basically carved a path in the mountains through like sheer will and determination and just like brute force of walking that much. The people who were doing the trading on these trails were carrying like 200 pounds of goods, and we're walking them literally from up here in the mountains to down in the coast. And that's like a 5-hour car ride. So I'm glad that I'm not carrying 200 pounds strapped to my back in a basket and also strapped to my forehead. What's really interesting about these Culuncos is that they create a whole different ecosystem. As you can tell, it doesn't even really look like I'm in the same place that I was showing you the little house and some of the plants. And that's because it really just does create its own little microclimate down here. The Culuncos are an onomatopoeia. They were actually named by the Spanish because people were carrying chicha, or a type of alcohol, and in the clay bottles would make this gluk-glunk, gluk-glunk, gluk-glunk sound. So it's an onomatopoeia. And here we are out of the trail, so you can see. And I'm gonna point, that's where we, back there, that's where we came from. So a little bit different. Sheryl, I am so excited to learn about some of the indigenous cultures in that area, how they manage the land, and a little bit about maybe their structures and just kind of anything that you want to highlight. And I know that's your area, I know that's where you study, and I know that's where you do your field work, so I'm sure you have very interesting and important things to say about it. For everyone else, I will see you sometime next week with another video that I haven't yet planned, so I have no idea what it's going to be. And be sure to check out all of Sheryl's stuff over here and all of my stuff over here, and I will see you all very soon. Bye!